We've introduced a new simplified alcohol duty system based on the common sense principle of taxing alcohol by strength to modernise the existing duties, support businesses and meet our public health objectives. The first time that public health objectives have been inserted into the alcohol duty system.
So look, the truth is it's not simpler. In fact, it's misleading to cite public health objectives, because if the new system really was intended to meet public health objectives, then there wouldn't be the huge variations in duty paid by different products of the same strength, which we see very clearly in the 3.5 to 8.5% ABV band, where cider pays less than half the duty of beer and even less than half the duty on other products. So the government's using public health arguments as a thin veneer to maintain market distortions.
And this reflects four principles that I think it would be helpful for me to set out today. The first is that the duty system should be fair to producers who make and grow the wines that we all enjoy. It should recognise the importance of jobs and the importance of pubs in their role as well in our national life. It should also tackle the problem of harmful high-strength products being sold too cheaply, and it should support innovation and modern drinking trends, particularly that trend that we see today moving towards lower alcohol products.
So let's tackle those principles now. Is the new system fair to all producers? Well, no, because only wine can't dictate its ABV, so it's not fair on wine producers at all. Secondly, does it support businesses? Well, no, we definitely don't think it does. We have a letter signed by more than 120 businesses telling the government that it is not better for them, but the government is refusing to listen. Next, the duty system was really never designed to support pubs. It's quite right, and we agree, we should be shining the spotlight on the importance of the hospitality sector, which is so much more than just pubs. Approximately half of the serves in the hospitality sector are wines and spirits. Successful hospitality businesses cater for all types of alcoholic drink, and non, and of course food. What we can't understand is why the Tories have specifically chosen to tax wine and spirits more harshly than other categories since 2010. Next, the new system has actually lowered tax on high-strength beer and high-strength ciders at the top end of the range. That doesn't fit with the principles. And lastly, the trend towards lower alcohol is principally as a result of industry innovation, nothing to do with the tax system. Overall, we thought the principles of the review were making the system fairer, simpler and less bureaucratic. Well, for wine, it does absolutely none of those.
But we should be confident that the bureaucratic burden under the new system is manageable.
So the government says that it's confident the bureaucratic burden under the new duty system is manageable. But how can they be confident, particularly if the whole of the wine sector is telling them that it isn't manageable, from small independent businesses to major wine retailers? We at the Wine and Spirit Trade Association are the largest drinks trade association in the UK, and we've been telling the Treasury since they devised this scheme under then-Chancellor Rishi Sunak that it would be complex, costly, and that the easement was a stay of execution but not a resolution. Now, one of the WSTA's major wine retailing members is telling us that the new system is impossible to implement. And we're hearing the same from across the WSTA, members of all sizes, from supermarkets to importers, wine warehouse operators to off-licenses in every constituency across the country. Not a single member has said to us that it'll be easy to introduce the new system, that it will result in no new bureaucracy, or indeed that there will be no costs. Frankly, it's just not true.
Every other product is already paying duty based on our strength-based system, including, my honourable friend quite rightly pointed out, the weather impact of wine, including cider, which also is subject to seasonal variability challenges.
The Minister talks about taking on board the weather impacts on wine. Well, interestingly, even with the wine easement, wine is already part of a strength-based system. It's just pinned to a particular point for administrative ease. Now, cider and wine, are they a good comparison? Frankly, no, not really. There are strict production rules for wine, which is not at all the case for cider. Secondly, It's not just the production rules. An average strength cider, the ABV can vary by up to 20% from the label value. This allows sufficient flexibility for seasonal variations without having to relabel and recalculate duty. For wine, permitted tolerances are much less. They're between 3 and 5%. And that means that different vintages require different strengths to be labelled, and therefore duty to be calculated and recalculated for each wine for every vintage.
But to make the wine easement permanent, as my honourable friend for Stevenage has called for, would go against the principle of this alcohol reform to move to a strength-based system which brings in this public health element.
Now, the Minister has said that making the wine easement permanent would go against the principle of the reforms of moving to a strength-based system that brings in a public health element. Frankly, that's simply not the case. Our suggestion to maintain the wine easement that's already in place retains those principles whilst avoiding immeasurable damage to wine businesses. It builds in the public health objectives that are already there and have been since the 1st of August 2023. And in fact, the existing rules already treat different types of alcohol differently. There are different rates applied across the 3.5 to 8.5% ABV band, and they're far greater than we're proposing with keeping the easement. All we're asking for is continuing a small amount of flexibility for applying duty to wines in a very limited alcohol range.
And as I've already said, while the impact on wine is clearly being felt, we have provided this easement over a period of time that was decided in consultation with the wine industry, in 4 rounds of consultation ahead of this reform coming into being.
So the Minister has talked about 4 rounds of consultation and the fact that the wine easement is there to give us time to get our house in order. Well, I can tell him that the wine industry has been united across all 4 rounds of consultation, a number of which happened before he was in post, that we cannot see how taxing by strength could be administered effectively, as well as penalising wine from warmer climates like South Africa and Australia, where we do a lot of our trade with. That explains why only a few countries around the world levy duty by strength for wine. Taxing all wine by degree is not fit for purpose for the world's second biggest importer of wine. So, the wine easement, we consider it a stay of execution, not a resolution. It needs to be made permanent.
I can tell my honourable friend for Colchester that the wine industry has benefited from cuts or freezes to wine duty at 5 of the 11 last fiscal event, and compared to 2015, wine duty is some 12% lower in real terms. And I feel, Mr. Henderson, that is something we can all raise a glass to.
So, before you raise your glass, let me tell you this. Since 2010, wine and fortified wine are the only alcoholic drinks that have been subject to duty rises in excess of CPI. Since 2015, wine and fortified wine have been subject to greater increases than all other categories of alcohol. Duty in 2015 was £2.05 per bottle. Now, £2.67. That's an increase of over 30%. I can't raise a glass to that, neither should you.
Overall, I can tell her that these reforms to our alcohol system simplify our tax duty system, and this is a Brexit freedom.
Brexit was supposed to free businesses from unnecessary EU red tape. We'd all applaud that. Taxing wine by degree is only possible now the UK has left the EU, yet it's going to impose far more red tape on businesses than the previous EU regime. In other words, the government is doing exactly the opposite of what it said it wanted to. It makes no sense, and the only way to avoid it is to keep the wine easement.
That wine is still able to be labelled to 0.5% ABV. DEFRA have introduced guidance and an option to label to 0.1%, but this is optional, and I want to be really clear about that today.
The easement is the only thing preventing red tape from choking thousands of UK businesses, especially SMEs. Whilst labelling to a decimal point is voluntary, It's already the norm in many winemaking countries from which the UK buys, for example, Australia and the USA. The introduction of taxation by degree will incentivise producers to label to 1 decimal point. This means that, if the wine easement is removed, it is very likely to result in every business having to pay all 30 of the new per bottle amounts imposed by the new regime.
And I'm confident that this policy is the right one, not just for the wine industry, but for the whole of the United Kingdom.
At the very least, the wine industry and its 30 million UK consumers think the Minister's confidence is woefully misplaced. Finally, let me finish with a quote from one of our members. "The end of the easement will have sealed the fate of many businesses which will have gone under thanks to this government's choice to press on with a complex, costly and bureaucratic new alcohol duty regime. And they've done it in the face of business advice, warnings and outright opposition."